you the night before? Did you get a good night's sleep, or I couldn't sleep very well last night, the night before or something?
The very high level process overview,
Uh-huh.
and then I looked again at all the formulas and things that I had to memorize, and I made a sheet of things that I was going to look at the day of before I went into the exam, like the stuff that I knew I was going to have a problem with,
Uh-huh.
or that I knew would be straight memorization. So when I got in there, they were fresh in my mind, and I could jot them down on the paper that they give you. So, and then I just transposed, so that became my new memory sheet. So then I had that to be able to reference throughout the test.
Right. How about in terms of, were there any surprises when you went to the Prometric site? Did you know you were going to get hand wanded? Did you guys get any of that?
Yeah, it was fingerprinted. It was like I put my hand down on the thing, and it read the veins in my hand.
TSA is a piece of cake compared to what Prometric was.
Really?
And I didn't expect it to be notarized. Like when I came out and I passed, like notarizing it, I was a little taken aback.
Oh, that's interesting. I think different Prometric sites do something a little bit different.
They do, because I had taken a different exam in Brookfield. I took one in the Chicago area, and I took one in Wisconsin. I took a different exam, and the one in Wisconsin, they were just so pleasant. And I mean, I think they would have sat down and taken the test for me. The people were just so nice, you know.
You know,
The one in Deerfield, they were, I mean, I'm sure that criminals get treated better.
Oh, I've heard all sorts of things. Some places they actually do the metal detector hand wanding.
And I had to turn out my pockets too.
Turn
out my pockets, and then
I roll up my sleeves.
Yeah, that's what we had to do. Turn out the pockets, really make sure not even Kleenex or anything.
Yeah, you couldn't bring
I
Kleenex.
had to take my shoes off and make sure, and dump, like, pretend that I was dumping them out. That
I didn't
wasn't
have all that.
hiding anything in my shoes.
And
They just asked me if I had anything else in my
watching you.
pocket. And I was like,
I didn't
no.
go through that rigorous search.
It really depends on where.
And they had cameras watching the whole time.
They had the cameras.
Yeah.
It was a 4-hour exam, so if you had to leave, you had to sign out and have your driver's license with you. Come back in, and then you had to go through the whole check again with your pockets turned out and go back in and sit there and get back into your spot. And, you had to leave everything behind. Like you said, they gave you a blank piece of paper and a pencil. They gave you a pencil. You couldn't even take your own pencil in and start from where you left off.
And the clock is still ticking too,
Right.
right? When you're
Correct.
taking a break, so you have to keep in mind that when you leave, you have to sign out, sign back in, all that.
And it comes off your time, so.
Right. Oh, did you guys, any of you, were you able to bring in food or drinks into the
No,
Just
nothing.
driver's license.
driver's
I had
license?
driver's license and the key to the locker that I put all my stuff in.
Right.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's it.
That was it.
One of the things that I thought, that I think is really important for taking the test is to stick with your game plan. Well, whatever game plan you have going into it, stick with it as much as possible. And, obviously if you forget something, no big deal. But sticking with whatever the process is that you're planning to do going in. If you plan to skip all math problems that are not real easy, skip them. Don't get stuck on them. I thought, that was something that was very, very important. And another thing that I did too, that I just usually do with tests in general, is what I think of as like grow as you go. So as I go through problems and I hit a particular subject, and if maybe a subsequent problem 10, 15 problems later, it's related to that same thing and it confirms an answer for me, I jot it down, and on my brain dump I grow it as I go, and I just keep going. And then that way I don't have to think of whatever that is that I had to think of it the first time. But after that point, I don't have to think of it anymore. I just refer back to the sheet.
Did anyone else find anything similar that, some questions helped you answer other questions?
Absolutely.
Yes.
To me, it was very important to take some mock exams up front, get an idea about the timing. Then you could just go through some questions and then postpone some and really spend time and think about them. I wasn't sure. That was very important. Also to tune into the wording, what kind of way are the questions worded that you get? Sometimes the answer is not really straightforward. So really you need to pay a lot of attention to the way how it's worded, that you get an idea that the one or other direction is more important in that specific situation.
And also realizing that the test may not necessarily be your experience or how you do things at work, but the test is testing you on how well you know what they want you to know. So sometimes you kind of have to turn off in your brain that I would do this when actually PMI says you should actually do it this way. One example was one of the questions I got in a mock exam was, if you hear two people talking about a change that they want to make, what would you do? And one of the options was go up and talk to them about the change process, which is what I would have done, but it was the wrong thing. The answer to the test question was schedule a meeting to go over the change that they'd like to make and then put it in. So it's just stuff like that. You got to kind of know what they're looking for.
And I think also along those lines is to always look for the best answer and not the correct answer, because you really, really hung up trying to look for the correct answer. And I think that kind of goes back to part of what he was saying as far as those practice tests. I personally don't think that you can really pass the test if you don't go through some practice tests, not because the material is hard. It's not really hard. It's just a matter of knowing how they're going to come at you, with the questions and the perspective. That's all it is. None of the materials, rocket science.
Well, I think you have to something you had said before, you need to work with whatever system works for you.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't do a lot of practice tests. I did whatever material was that I was going through my review, but I didn't do a lot of practice tests because for me, if I got stuff wrong going into it, it's going to change my mindset for stuff that I should be solid in. So it's knowing how I function that wasn't a good strategy for me. So you know yourself and you still need to stick to it even as you're prepping for this exam.
I did notice that there was about, I'd say between 15 and 20% of the questions I'd already seen and already answered before.
Oh, 15 to 20.
15 to 20% at least.
One of the things that I liked about doing practice questions was it made me focus on the question, because you really have to know, you really have to read what area in the project you are in when the question is asked. Are you in root cause analysis? Are you in just the beginning phases of the project? Because that could determine what tool you'd be using or what the answer would actually be. So you could have the same question look very similar, but it's based on what part of the process you're in, and you could very easily give the wrong answer.
And that goes into what I thought were some of the hardest questions was, what would you do next?
Yeah.
There might be 3 things on there that you need to do, but in their book they have this is the next thing you need to do in the list. And so I think those were some of the hardest questions.
How about in terms of time? Did you guys have enough time to do 200 questions in 4 hours?
Yes.
Plenty.
Yeah, it was
Time.
plenty.
I
Time
finished
was
a half
not
hour
a-
early.
I was done early too.
I finished a half hour early and I'd already gone back through the exam.
I think it took me 2.5 hours.
I didn't go back through. Once I answer, I don't second guess.
Yeah, that's just knowing yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's knowing how you're
It's like you said, it's your
Yeah.
style.
Any other tips for future students about the exam?
Know your way. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just gonna say, believe in your preparation.
Yeah, be confident.
Be confident about, if you study, know that you studied. If you know the material, know that you know the material. So when you go in and answer, you don't second guess yourself. You're not wishy-washy, yep, that's the answer. Or if you don't know it, you take your best shot because you believe in what you did, and be confident in your best shot, because you're not gonna know everything. Nobody does, but just believe in yourself.
I think to piggyback on that is to still be organized while you're taking the exam, because there are things that I skipped or what have you, and you needed to have a logical way to go back and figure out that I skipped these tests. So how he was saying, maybe you skip all math. Well, you needed to know what question that was and be able to find that, right, to figure out where you were going.
Something else I would say is what I kind of consider manage your personal stakeholder expectations. And what I mean by that is those closest to you during the time that you're preparing for the test, to make sure that they understand what it is that you're doing, the commitment that you're making. And that way it's no surprise to them, be it your family or whoever it is, of why you're not able to be there quite as much and why you need that support. And that is temporary. And it'll be over in a couple of weeks. Whatever time.
And unless you've been through the PMI, the PMP exam prep process, no one else understands it,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of a unique thing,
Very time absorbing.
right? But did you find it worthwhile in terms of getting your
Yes,
PMP?
absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
In terms of, what would you say?
I would say
In what way?
professionally, like the return on investment is huge, because you spend a few $100s to actually take the test. You spend hundreds of dollars to prepare for it. But looking at that investment and the difference in the kind of position you can get and the responsibility you can get and the job satisfaction that you can have from managing this chaos and moving forward and actually getting something done and being the reason, the one that orchestrates everything. For $1,000-something, you can get all that and some hard work, and like I said, the return on investment was well worth it.
Think about it, if you actually ever have to look for a job in the project or program management area without PMP, it's hard to find anything. And if you just say get the job 1 month earlier because you are PMP, not to talk about higher salary you probably get, even just 1 month earlier, you are well ahead of. So
I
it's,
think it opens up a lot of doors, and for me, it's opened up doors that I didn't expect to have. So it's definitely worth it.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. It's good to get some insight into the PMP exam and the whole process.